So if you walk into like literally any bookstore right now, or just scroll through the business section of whatever audio app you're
Oh,
using,
yeah, it's everywhere.
right, you are just bombarded by the exact same message. I mean, it's on every cover, it's in every guru's keynote speech.
They all say the exact same thing.
Yeah, they say, conquer your fear, banish negative thoughts.
Fear is the mind killer. Right.
Exactly. There is this massive multi-million-dollar self-help industry, and it's built entirely on this premise that if you want to be a successful founder, you have to somehow cure yourself of the fear of failure.
Like it's some sort of disease you caught.
Yes, like it's a cognitive disease.
Hmm.
But what if that entire premise is just fundamentally mathematically wrong?
Well, the research says it is.
Right, which brings us to today. Welcome to this deep dive. And our mission today is strict. Honestly, it's a little aggressive.
We're going after the conventional wisdom today.
Yeah. We are. We are going to completely rewire the conventional founder mindset. We're going to break down exactly why banishing negative thoughts is, frankly, terrible advice.
It really is.
And we'll show you how the absolute outliers in the business world, they actually weaponize their fear of failure. They turn it into this massive, unfair competitive advantage.
But doing that requires a total paradigm shift. I mean, a complete reset of how you think.
So to do this, we're looking at this fascinating piece of research from UC Berkeley and Erasmus University. It's titled The Power of Negative Thinking, a model of entrepreneurship aspirations and fear of failure.
Which is a very academic title. But what these researchers actually did is they took the concept of fear, dragged it completely out of that fluffy self-help realm, and they ran it through the hard mathematics of behavioral economics.
Which is exactly why we're digging into it for this deep dive. Because, they don't just look at fear as some generic risk aversion, do they?
No, not at all. They defined it much more specifically. They defined fear of failure as a very specific manifestation of loss aversion.
Loss aversion. Okay, let's unpack that for a second.
Yeah, so if we look at the foundational behavioral economics work, like Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, loss aversion is this proven principle that human beings, we feel the pain of a loss roughly twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
So losing $100 hurts your brain twice as much as finding $100 feels good.
Exactly. The math of our own psychology is inherently tilted toward the negative.
But how does that apply to a founder launching a company? Because, to experience a loss, you have to have something to lose in the first place, right?
And that right there is the crucial mechanism. You can only define a loss or a gain if you have a starting line, a baseline.
Right.
In this research paper, they call that your aspiration level or your reference point. So your fear of failure isn't some, abstract terror of the dark unknown.
It's tied to something real.
Exactly. Mathematically anchored to whatever specific benchmark you have set for yourself.
Okay, so if you fall short of that benchmark,
your brain processes it as a devastating loss. And because, like we said, losses hurt twice as much, your brain will do almost anything, including self-sabotage, to avoid falling short of that specific target.
Wow. Okay, I think a good way to visualize this for everyone listening is think of it like a thermostat in your house.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. You set the temperature, that's your reference point. If the room drops below that temperature, the furnace aggressively kicks on to heat it back up.
Yes.
So in this case, the furnace is your fear, your anxiety, your drive. But the problem is, most founders are setting their thermostats completely wrong.
Completely wrong. Which brings us to the first massive hurdle the paper identifies, the entry trap.
Right. Let's talk about how most people set that initial thermostat when they're, just thinking about taking the entrepreneurial leap.
Yeah, this is where so many incredibly talented builders just get paralyzed before they even write a single line of code. The researchers point out that most people anchor their aspiration level to their foregone wage.
Meaning their previous 9-to-5 salary.
Exactly. When you sit down to decide if you should quit your job and start a company, your brain just automatically looks backward.
So if you were making, say, $150,000 a year at some mid-level tech job,
you unconsciously set your startup's baseline benchmark for success at making $150,000 a year.
And I know so many people listening are just nodding along right now because that sounds totally logical.
It does.
It's the classic safe advice, right? Build the side hustle until your revenue matches your salary and then make the leap.
It sounds incredibly logical on paper, but behaviorally, it is a death sentence for your motivation.
Walk us through why.
Just walk through the loss aversion ratio we just talked about.
Yeah.
If your goal is just to replace your old salary, The mathematical gain of hitting that goal is actually zero.
Because you're just getting back to the exact lifestyle you already had.
Right. But the potential loss,
Mm-hmm.
failing, blowing your savings, having to crawl back to your old boss and beg for your job back, that looms twice as large psychologically.
Oh, wow.
So when your brain runs that subconscious formula, the expected utility of becoming an entrepreneur is deeply negative. The math makes the leap look like a terrible, irrational deal.
I have to say, I despise that conventional replace your salary wisdom anyway. I really do.
It's awful advice.
Treating your startup like a replacement 9 to 5, I mean, it completely misses the point of entrepreneurship. You are taking on asymmetric risk.
Right.
If you measure your success by your old corporate paycheck, you are just artificially capping your potential while taking on like 100 times more stress.
You're capping your upside but taking all the downside.
Exactly. It's like buying a Formula One car just to drive through a school zone.
That is exactly what it is.
You're creating a game where the absolute best case scenario is that you basically just break even on your lifestyle. So of course people are terrified to launch under those conditions.
Because you've set the thermostat so low that the furnace of your ambition never actually kicks on.
Right. You have rigged the psychological game against yourself. So how do we actually fix this?
Well, this brings us to our first concrete tactical tip for the listener today, specifically for the launch phase. If you want to overcome the fear of starting, you cannot try to meditate the fear away.
No, you can't just breathe through it.
No, you have to hack the math. You must decouple your launch metrics from your old salary immediately.
Okay, so mechanically, how do we trick our own loss aversion here?
When you launch, you need to price your minimum viable product, your MVP, and set your revenue targets based strictly on total addressable market, your TAM.
Based on the market, not your life.
Yes. You base it on market penetration, completely ignoring what you need to pay your rent next month. I mean, if you used to make 100 grand a year, do not build a business designed to yield 100 grand.
Right.
You need to build a high-ticket or infinitely scalable model designed to capture $10 million.
Because by doing that, you completely change the math of the equation.
Exactly. By setting the benchmark at 10 million, based on the market's actual size, your old salary just becomes irrelevant as a reference point.
It's noise.
Yet now the potential gain is so massive, so life-changing, that it finally outweighs the magnified pain of the potential loss. You haven't cured your fear of failure.
You've just made the price so big that your brain calculates the fear is suddenly worth enduring.
Precisely.
Okay, so decoupling your benchmark from your old salary. That gets you out of the driveway, you've taken the leap, but once you're actually in the trenches building the thing, the day-to-day reality sets in.
And that's where the next trap is.
Yeah, because your brain is probably going to snap right back to trying to protect what little you have, right?
Usually, yes.
So let's move into the customer acquisition phase.
This is exactly what the data shows, and it reviews this paralyzing effect of having reasonable goals.
Reasonable goals are bad now.
Well, the paper highlights this really fascinating finding. Post-entry, once the business is actually running, if your aspirations are low, like if your thermostat is set to just survive or hit really modest targets, fear of failure fundamentally paralyzes
it
you.
makes you conservative.
Incredibly conservative.
I'm guessing this means a lot of founders just end up zombie walking through their daily operations because they're terrified to spend a single dime.
Yes, exactly. The researchers cite a 2011 study by Shore and Zuo that looked at entrepreneurs of necessity.
What does that mean exactly?
These are founders who start businesses during an economic recession, primarily because, the job market dried up and they basically had no other options.
Okay, so their aspirations are generally just to keep the lights on.
Right. And the study found that these founders make incredibly conservative investments in their businesses. But what's wild is that this behavior permanently imprints on them.
Wait, really? Permanently?
Yeah. Even years later, when the economy booms and capital is flowing, they stay conservative. Yeah. Because their internal benchmark is still just survival.
Wow.
So every single dollar they spend on marketing or infrastructure feels like a massive, painful loss. They are perpetually playing not to lose rather than playing to win.
But let me push back on this a little bit because there is a very fine line here. I mean, cash is oxygen for a startup, right? Of course.
If you're pre-seed or you're bootstrapping, conserving capital isn't necessarily playing scared. It's just basic survival. I mean, you can't just burn cash blindly for the sake of being aggressive. Isn't downside protection just good business?
Strategic downside protection is good business, yes.
Yeah.
But letting loss aversion dictate your entire go-to-market strategy is fatal.
Okay, fair.
There is a big difference between optimizing your runway and starving your growth engine just because you're emotionally incapable of seeing a dollar leave your bank account.
Right. It's kind of like sitting at a casino playing the penny slots.
Oh, that's exactly it.
You're betting the absolute minimum because you are terrified of losing a single hand.
Mhm.
But meanwhile, the complimentary drinks in the hotel room, basically your operational burn rate, they are slowly eating your bankroll anyway.
Yes.
So playing not to lose is really just a slower, more agonizing way of bleeding out, like playing prevent defense in football when you have a tiny lead. You're just letting the clock kill you. That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And it translates directly to how early-stage founders handle customer acquisition.
Right.
If you are playing the penny slots with your startup, you are guaranteeing a slow death.
So what's the move?
Here is the tactical business tip for acquisition. Stop hedging your bets with micro budgets.
Oh man, this is the classic founder trap. The $5 a day ad spend?
Right. They spend $5 a day on Facebook, $5 on LinkedIn, $5 on Google, just to test the waters.
Or they commit to making like 5 cold calls a day.
Yes. That is the ultimate manifestation of low aspiration, fear-driven behavior. Because they are so terrified of losing money or getting rejected on the phone, they spread their bets so ridiculously thin that none of the channels can possibly gain traction.
Right.
Every dollar spent, every no on the phone, registers as a painful micro-loss. So they try to minimize the pain by doing the bare minimum everywhere.
So what is the aggressive growth strategy to actually override that instinct?
You have to adopt a burn-the-boats acquisition strategy. You pick one and only one aggressive outbound channel, and you commit to a volume that makes you deeply uncomfortable.
Okay.
If you are cold calling, you do not call 5 people a day to protect your ego. You commit to 100.
100 a day. And how does that actually hack the psychology we're talking about? Like, why does 100 calls work when 5 calls paralyzes them?
Because you are actively manipulating your reference point. You make hitting that 100 calls your new daily benchmark. You are essentially crowding out the small fear with a much larger systemic fear.
Oh, I see.
If you only hit 90 calls, you train your brain to register that as the painful failure. You use the sheer terror of missing your execution target to force yourself into aggressive action.
That is brilliant. You are literally flooding the system.
Exactly.
If I am genuinely terrified of missing my 100 call quota, I simply do not have the emotional bandwidth to care if call number 47 tells me to go to hell.
You don't have time to care.
Right. You stop worrying about the micro losses of individual rejections because you've manufactured a much bigger fear to override it.
Exactly. You are taking control of what you are afraid of. Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this research.
Okay, let's hear it.
If setting a reasonable quota makes you bleed out slowly, what happens when you set a delusional quota? We're moving from avoiding paralysis to actively generating high-octane outlier growth.
This is the weaponization phase.
Yes.
How do the outliers actually do this?
The core finding of the paper is this. When the threshold for success, your aspiration level, is set astronomically high, fear of failure magically transforms.
It stops paralyzing you.
Right. It stops being a paralyzing force, and it becomes an engine that motivates massive, almost incomprehensible additional sacrifices.
Because if your goal is massive, literally anything short of that is technically a failure. And we already established that failure hurts twice as much.
You got it. If your reference point is set to something borderline delusional, you are effectively living in the lost domain every single day. And because your brain hates being in the lost domain, it goes into absolute overdrive to close that gap.
It turns on the furnace.
Exactly. The paper brings in real-world examples to illustrate how this looks in practice, starting with Jill Blashack Strahan. She's the founder of Tastefully.
Okay, what's her story? I'm not familiar with her.
Her starting conditions were incredibly tough. She was widowed. She was 3 months behind on her mortgage. She had a young son to raise entirely by herself.
That is intense.
Yeah. The standard advice would be to get a safe, salaried job. Her reference point, naturally, should have been pure survival. Just keep the lights on.
A textbook setup for an entrepreneur of necessity, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. But she actively refused that benchmark. Instead of setting her thermostat to survival, she set it to empire.
Empire. I love that.
She decided she was going to build a massive enterprise. So think about the daily operational reality of that shift. If your baseline is just survival, taking a Saturday off feels fine. But if your internal baseline is building a $100 million empire, taking a Saturday off feels like a mathematical loss. It feels like you are failing your benchmark.
The furnace kicks on.
Yes.
Yeah.
The brain's loss aversion kicks in and forces you back to work. She threw her entire savings into the venture, and she worked 80-hour weeks relentlessly for over a decade.
That's insane.
The fear of not providing the absolute best life for her son, the fear of falling short of this massive empire she envisioned, it became her operational engine. By 2012, her company was grossing nearly $100 million.
Unbelievable.
Her operating motto was literally, you always have a choice. You can get better or get bitter.
That shows exactly how the reference point dictates the output. And I know the paper mentions Will Smith too, right?
Yeah.
How does a Hollywood actor fit into behavioral economics?
It's the exact same psychological mechanism. Before he was an A-list actor, he was a rapper in Philadelphia. When his collaboration with DJ Jazzy Jeff, Parents Just Don't Understand, became a massive hit, that could have easily been the ceiling.
Right. For most people, that's it. You made it.
For Jazzy Jeff, that level of music success was the pinnacle. That was his reference point. But Will Smith looked at the landscape, recognized how quickly music careers can fade, and he actively set his aspirations astronomically higher.
So he didn't just want another hit.
No, he didn't even just want a hit TV show. His stated benchmark was to become the biggest movie star in the world.
So he intentionally created a massive gap between his current reality and his baseline.
Yes. When asked about his work ethic, Smith explicitly says he uses the fear of failure as fuel. He manufactured fear by setting the bar so high that he was constantly falling short.
That is wild.
If someone told him he couldn't do something, he internalized it as a direct threat to his benchmark. The negative thoughts, the intense fear of not achieving that next impossible level, it didn't paralyze him. It forced him to outwork everyone else in the room.
Okay, this is all incredibly compelling, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second and bring up a major structural concern. If every single founder listening to this deep dive right now suddenly sets their internal thermostat to $1 billion, doesn't the entire startup ecosystem just implode?
What do you mean?
Well, it sounds like a giant prisoner's dilemma. Like, we're just inciting an arms race where everyone works 100 hours a week, they burn themselves out, and they experience way more painful failures because their expectations are impossibly high. But the market only has so many customers. Aren't we just manufacturing a collective mental health crisis over a fixed pie?
It is a brilliant question, and the paper explicitly acknowledges that.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. If the market were a fixed pie, you would be 100% correct. It would be a destructive prisoner's dilemma. But, and this is the crucial distinction, as a visionary founder, you are not fighting over a fixed pie. You are creating surplus.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning that when founders set massive aspirations and they inject that level of high-octane effort into their companies, they don't just steal a few points of market share from a competitor, they invent entirely new categories.
Oh.
They create new technologies. The aggressive pursuit of these delusional goals expands the overall pie for everyone.
Okay, I buy that. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So how do we translate this into a tactical tip for the founder who is, like, in the weeds right now?
Let's give them one.
Let's say you have a listener who has product market fit. They're doing $1 million in ARR, but they are terrified of taking the next big expensive step to actually scale. They are micromanaging everything because it feels safe.
Here is your tactical move for scaling.
Yeah.
You need to institute a borderline delusional objective and key result, an OKR.
Okay.
You set a goal so big, like 10x your current revenue in the next 12 months, that your current company infrastructure will visibly snap just looking at it.
Explain the mechanism there. Like, if I'm doing $1 million a year and I set the goal for 10 million, I know instantly that my current customer service team, my supply chain, my software, all of it is completely inadequate to handle 10 million.
Precisely. And that is exactly what you want.
You want it to break.
Yes. Because if you set a goal for 20% growth, your brain says, okay, I'll just work a few weekends and squeeze more out of the current team. It's comfortable. But when the benchmark is 1,000% growth, the sheer terror of missing that massive goal forces your hand. You have effectively backed yourself into a corner.
Oh, I see. You're using the fear of missing the 10x goal to override the fear of spending money.
Yes. When the benchmark is 10 million, the fear of failure actually forces you to stop micromanaging and start delegating.
Because you literally can't do it all yourself anymore.
Right. You can use the terror of falling short to justify making that scary, expensive executive hire today.
So you hire the seasoned VP of sales who costs more than you currently take home.
Because suddenly not hiring them guarantees you fail your internalized OKR. You have weaponized your own loss aversion to force yourself to build the infrastructure required to scale.
You are making the status quo infinitely scarier than the unknown. That is such a powerful reframe.
It works.
Okay, let's bring this all together. For the builder listening right now, what is the ultimate synthesis of this research?
The overarching takeaway is that you have to stop reading self-help books that tell you to cure your fear. Fear of failure is not a weakness. It is a mechanical, biological feature of human psychology called loss aversion.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It was a tool.
Mm-hmm.
If you set small, reasonable goals based on your old salary or just trying to survive the quarter, your fear will make you a coward. It will paralyze your growth.
Right.
But if you actively reprogram your benchmark to massive world-changing goals, your fear will make you a machine. It will biologically drive you to make the aggressive decisions necessary to win.
It all comes down to where you choose to set the thermostat.
It does. And I want to leave the listener with one final, very aggressive paradigm shift to mull over.
Hit us.
We talk about setting your reference point based on your own massive revenue goals.
Yeah.
But what if you redefined your reference point externally?
Externally, what do you mean?
If fear of failure is driven by loss aversion relative to a baseline, well, what happens if you consciously start defining your competitor's success as your own personal baseline?
Oh man, that is ruthless.
Think about the psychology of it. If your internal benchmark is that your company must be the absolute, undisputed market leader, then every single time your competitor closes a deal, your brain processes that as a loss.
Wow.
If you rewire yourself so that every dollar they make feels like a dollar physically stolen from your wallet, how aggressively would that dictate your growth strategy tomorrow morning?
You certainly wouldn't be playing penny slots.
No, you would be burning the boats.
You would be an absolute force of nature. Listen, if you want to stop thinking like a comfortable corporate employee and you actually want to execute like a chart-topping founder, you cannot afford to misunderstand these psychological mechanics.
Absolutely not.
The value of this deep dive of learning how to weaponize your own loss aversion, it is literally the difference between bleeding out slowly with reasonable goals and scaling aggressively by expanding the pie.
It's game-changing.
If this conversation shifted your perspective today and you are ready to stop playing not to lose, hit subscribe, follow the channel, and join us for the next deep dive. We are going to keep tearing down conventional wisdom and giving you the tools to rewire your mindset for aggressive growth. Until next time, stop trying to conquer your fear and start giving it a much bigger target.